You are one of the restless dead. No longer bound by the mortal coil, you have slipped into what lies beyond. But there is no peace in death. You have things to do, unfinished business to take care of. There are many dangers, many obstacles keeping you from completing your task in the afterlife, and one of those threats are specters. Hello, and welcome to another lore video about Wraith the Oblivion. In the last part, we talked about specters, and now we will continue with specters and their cults. What is a specter cult? Aside from a few specific things, there is little in common between specters. Yes, specters lurk in the labyrinth, haunt the shores of the Tempest, and seek to do harm to the restless dead. If these activities were all that they did, they'd be easily dealt with, but being able to create a cult implies something unusual about a specter. Most are too consumed with self-loathing and seek oblivion too strongly to do anything like bring a group of like-minded specters together or join such a group. Here is one of the great secrets of any lasting specter cult. It's not composed of just specters. Rare and exceptional specters can put together groups that attract wraiths to join them, either through misdirection, deception, manipulation, or ruthless exploitation of their wants and needs. A specter is a dangerous thing. A specter with the strength of will to deny Oblivion's call long enough to form a cult is even worse. Most of all, a specter who can convince others to support a cult to their own detriment is a very successful monster. Wraiths often see specters as nightmares, but that simplistic view is detrimental to a wraith's survival and is simply wrong. A wraith can never know for sure when they're talking to a specter because the thing that makes and drives them is the shadow, and every wraith carries a shadow waiting to slip free and make them a specter too. Everyone has a breaking point, and a specter cult is all about finding and pressing that breaking point. Here are some of the cults that seek to bring wraiths to that fate. Alex Salazar died at age 27. Her parents were taken in a car accident when she was 18, and Alex worked exceptionally hard as an orderly in a hospital in order to get into a university program. Then she got sick. Really sick. Physicians were baffled, and continuing to seek treatment for this unknown illness cost Alex money she didn't have, so she stopped going to doctors. Instead, she took up the rosary left behind by her mother and she prayed. But prayer didn't save Alex either. The night it happened, she felt her lungs fill up, coughed until her throat was raw and her sink full of fluid. She died wholly in the grip of her doubts and so came to the Shadowlands already a specter. Alex found her shadow even before death took her. To all outward appearances, Alex Salazar is quite possibly the nicest wraith imaginable. Alex is full of information on what it means to be restless. She knows the basic structure of what it means to be a wraith and is more than happy to explain fetters to newcomers. She'll happily explain what a shadow is and how to avoid specters. She will, if a wraith isn't careful, become your best friend until she knows practically everything about you. Then, without a scrap of regret, Alex destroys everything you have left. She'll ensure that your fetter is wiped out. She'll guide you through the worst harrowing imaginable and ensure that you suffer until you break and allow your shadow to devour you. If possible, she'll deliver you straight to oblivion and non-existence. Because Alex is one of the sacrifices, she truly and wholly believes that she is doing you a favor. The Shadowlands are just a cruel punchline at the end of the joke that is life. You suffer, struggle, and die, and even then there is no rest and no way out of toil, pain, and loss. Even death is no release. Alex is just one of the members of the Sacrifices cult, but just because anyone could be a member doesn't mean they're everywhere. The Sacrifices are hardly innumerable or omnipresent. They work best when they're both subtle and rare. They're a cult of specters that want to be dissolved forever in oblivion and see themselves as martyrs enduring yet more pain and suffering for the sake of others. Eventually, they burn out. All sacrifices want to be eaten away by nothingness, so every moment they spend deceiving others is both a sacrament and a cursed burden. There's a saying in the Shadowlands, "If you're dead, don't go to Lynn." Lynn, Massachusetts is a town in the Boston metropolitan area, the largest city in Essex County, and is a mere 3 miles from Boston proper. Although Lynn is a fairly regular place to be for the living, Lynn is something else entirely in the Shadowlands. Visitors to Lynn now find themselves faced with a warped reflection of the city in the Skinlands. Modern-day Lynn has a park called High Rock Tower Reservation, which is a nihil, a portal that leads straight to the Tempest. Around the nihil, the true spear rules. She is an entity spoken of in whispers, a spectre who has taken Tempest Weaving, one of the dark arcanoi used to manipulate the Tempest, and Soul Forging, and combined them to reshape and reforge her own corpus. She is immune to many arcanoi and to the ravages of being a spectre. Some specters see her as a means to an end, and others truly believe her goals will result with a remade underworld of true equality and the reward of merit. Those wraiths who do not join her must protect themselves because the members of her Est Machina, literally to the machine, are willing and able to drag wraiths to her Nihil Forge so that she can hammer them into teeth and bones for the colossal god she is building that she calls the true motive power. Est Machina are not the rulers of Lynn, however, and are not unstoppable with most of the wraiths in the area knowing what to avoid. As a Spectre cult, they also suffer from many, if not all, of the drawbacks of one, that is, an organization of beings who seek oblivion is hardly stable. Although the true spear is powerful, especially in terms of her brute strength and resistance to arcanoi, she can't be everywhere, and much of her time is spent working on the true motive power. Without her direct leadership, the specters and wraiths of Est Machina are far less effective. Because Est Machina has absolutely no friends in the Shadowland version of Lynn, everyone hates them, fears them, and wants to see them gone. Every wraith wants to avoid a harrowing, because the shadow that dwells within them is unleashed and calls on specters to subject the wraith's psyche to as many horrors as it takes to break them. Whether it comes from the destruction of the corpus of the wraith, from the loss of a fetter, or losing touch with one of their passions, emotions intimately connected to their identity, no wraith ever wants to feel that nihil open and drag them into the labyrinth. But when the shadow of a wraith starts the passion play, many specters are all too willing to participate. After all, there's an art to a perfect harrowing that takes the inner world of a wraith and twists it just enough to bring about pain, fear, and eventually a loss of the self so strong that oblivion seems the only answer. The harrowing can peel a wraith away from its connection to the Skinlands, strip it of its fetters, and utterly swamp them in oblivion. Of course, some restless pass through their harrowings intact. Sometimes they manage to prevent damage to their fetters and retain their passions. Also, the specters who participate in harrowings must follow the rules. Specters can't just show up in the surreal world of the harrowing and start trying to torture a wraith or hack its corpus away. They have to give them a way out and abide by the conditions of the scenario. Oblivion might have creeped into the harrowing, but it retains some of its original purpose, which is helping the wraiths come to grips with their deaths and prepare them to be free. Many specters resent these restrictions, but a few welcome the challenge. If driving a wraith to oblivion is an art form, then les voyeurs du mal are nothing if not artists. Unique among specters, the voyeurs are the closest thing the hive mind has to experts in the underpinnings of the harrowings. They know exactly what they can and can't do, and they never cheat. A wraith who longs for someone in the Skinlands to remember them will find that desire used against them, but it will never be anything basic. The voyeurs would rather see a wraith resolve their issues and stride forth confidently with renewed passions than feel like they'd done less than their absolute best, and playing by the rules is all part of the game. Of course, that counts only inside the harrowing. The voyeurs are absolutely thrilled to contract out their services to put a wraith into a harrowing by any means. Even for specters, the voyeurs are relentless once they've picked out or been solicited to run a wraith down and force it into a harrowing. In a way, they're the closest thing specters have to assassins. The Tempest is a place where the concept of oceans lingers, and it is expressed in nightmares and portents. The Tempest is as much a part of the underworld as the Shadowlands or the Labyrinth. Words like under and surrounding are used to describe the relationship between these places, but the truth is they are all and none of them. Some of the specters who haunt the Tempest are the sailors of the Sunless Sea, and they are monsters. If they were alive, they'd be something akin to pirates that attack travelers and steal whatever of value they can. But because they're specters, they often simply swarm their victims and force them to flee into a harrowing or lose their corpus. Unlike the last three I just spoke about, the sailors of the Sunless Sea are not coherent enough to forge soul steel, don't care about artistry, and because so little of their humanity is left, they could never deceive anyone about their motivations. They just haunt the nightmare ocean and look for victims. The sailors are the horrific crew of a ghost ship that haunts the Tempest. Sailing through the hazards of the storm sea, they are led by a hooded and cloaked figure with an enormous scythe. It has no visible face that can be seen behind the featureless helm it wears, and it never speaks. But the Spectres who labor in twisted service to it obey its every whim. One survivor of their attack called it the Granddaughter. The Granddaughter sails the Tempest in a ship made of soul steel and debris dredged from the Death Ocean. These debris are the flotsam and jetsam from souls that have forgotten their passions or been stripped of them, such as a dream of a lost toy or a memory of the day a loved one died, all lashed together into a nightmare ship. The Granddaughter roams the Tempest and preys on anyone its crew can catch. Some argue that the ship and the Granddaughter are one, and that the armored figure striding the decks is a manifestation of the ship's unnatural hunger for souls to drag to oblivion. In the next Wraith the Oblivion lore video, we'll go more in depth into that ocean of the underworld, the Tempest. Remember, Restless Dead, life can get worse after it ends.